Chapter 18. That morning was one dedicated to running errands for Dan and Gustavo. First, they went to the DMV where Dan got a temporary driver's license, and after going to the bank to withdraw some money, the two of them drove to the trucking company. They looked at the warehouse and the semis lined up in front of it. "That's a little bigger kind of trucks than those I drove back in Iran," Gustavo remarked. "Don't know if my license will be accepted." "Well, you won't know until you ask, will you?" Dan said, cracking a smile. He remembered the time he hesitated to enter the recruiting office at the naval base, when Gustavo told him the same thing. "Right," Gustavo said. "No harm in trying," he added, getting out of the car. Dan watched his friend walk toward the warehouse office. He was truly hoping that the big guy would get a break. On the other hand, he wondered if he would ever see Gustavo again after he would leave to return to his future. The thought of the possibility saddened him. A half an hour later, Gustavo was back. He was grinning from ear to ear. That's a good sign, Dan thought, as Gustavo opened the passenger door and climbed in. "So did you get the job?" Dan asked. "Yeah, and then some." "What does that mean?" "It means that it's going to be a free ride every time I'm out of town." "You mean meals and lodgings and everything?" Dan asked, all smiles. "Yep. By the time your friend Fabio comes back, I'll probably be out on the road earning my first paycheck." "That's fantastic!" Dan shouted in the confines of the car. It was the first time since they met at the shelter that Gustavo had displayed any sign of true happiness. "And when did they ask you to report for duty?" "I have to go for some training first, starting next Monday, so that I could handle these big rigs. But after that, it should be plain sailing, or plain driving, I should say." "Congratulations, Gustavo, you've done it!" Dan chuckled. "How about we go and celebrate tonight?" "Yeah, sounds like a great idea, but I want to ask you something, a favour really." "Okay, shoot," Dan replied, turning on the ignition. "What can I do?" "Could you lend me some money or come with me to buy some clothes?" "You've got it, man, no problem." Dan reversed the car out of the lot. "It would be about time for me to get some new jeans too. I think what Mrs. Stevens gave me has run its course." "Okay then," Gustavo said. "Why don't we go to the nearest department store and get ourselves redressed?" He laughed. Dan turned his head briefly. His friend was truly happy. He could see it. It was as if he had shed 10 years off his age. Silently, he thanked Nicholas, because he knew that somehow their messenger had something to do with Gustavo getting that job so fast. "A table for 5, Damiano said to the Mattia D as soon as they entered the tea room of one of the posh hotels on Miami Beach. Gabby, looking around her, no longer felt out of place. Most of the ladies wore similar dresses, shoes and hats as she and Malou did. As for Stefano, Daniel and Damianos, their suits could only be described as perfect for the occasion. White linen outfits, white shirts, a cravat, or light-coloured tie were all that it took to change their allure completely. Daniel still feeling uncomfortable looking at Damianos. "Are you really going to make us dance in this get-up?" "Not if you don't want to, Daniel, but I think someone will tempt you enough to have you on the dance floor in no time." "Like that girl in the red dress," Stefano rejoined, nodding in the young woman's direction and jabbing his brother in the ribs. "She's gorgeous." "Yeah, well, I don't know," Daniel said, turning to Gabby. "Will you dance?" "Let's just wait and see how it goes, Daniel. As Mum explained before, you never know what could happen when in the hands of our cat." "Your table's ready, sir," Mattia D told them just then. "Please follow me." Passing in between a few tables, Malou felt all eyes piercing her back and heard complimentary comments. She felt a bit timid, yet she had no longer any doubt about Damianos' power. He was going to be the perfect host while making sure the children enjoyed themselves. It was nice to be there, in fact. She could never have dreamed something like that happening to her and her children before taking her first trip into the past with Dan. Silently, she hoped he was all right. When tea, in a silver teapot, was served, the cakes and scones tempted everyone on a 3-tier plateau. Staring at them, Daniel couldn't resist. He took a small cake and put it on his plate. "If that tastes as good as it looks, I'll have a couple or 3 after this one." "Take it easy," Malou said quietly. "One pleasure at a time." She threw a gentle smile to Damianos. "Those scones look as divine as they taste, I'm sure," she added, taking one of them and placing it gingerly on the plate in front of her. A few minutes later, when the children and Malou seemed a little more relaxed, Damiano snapped his fingers and suddenly the backstage that had previously been decorated with flower pots and plants was transformed into a platform with a small orchestra. The music soon permeated the atmosphere and a few dancers took the floor. Stefano didn't wait to be asked. He got up and went to the young woman in the red dress and bowed politely. "Would you like to dance?" he asked her. "Oh yes," she replied, getting to her feet. Malou marvelled at the sight of her eldest dancing the foxtrot as if he had done it all his life. And it wasn't long before Daniel got up and invited Gabby to dance. His face lit up when he realised that he was light on his feet and that dancing with his sister wasn't that bad after all. She looked gorgeous, truth be told. You know, you really look good in that dress, he whispered in her ear. Well, thanks, bro, she grinned. And now that I see every girl is dressed like me, it feels good. Damien seemed happy about it too. Would you like to dance? He asked, turning to Malou. She hesitated. Do you think it's okay? I'm sure it is, Malou. Dan would be happy seeing you dressed like this and enjoying a couple of steps around the dance floor. All right then, she replied, taking Damienos' extended hand. I don't know if I'll remember how, though. It's like riding a bicycle, you never forget, he told her, walking up with Malou to the middle of the room. Returning to the apartment, arms laden with bags of clothes and new runners on their feet, Nicholas was expecting them. Don't say anything, Gustavo said, looking at their messenger with a broad grin on his face. Let's get rid of the shopping before you say a word, okay? Dan had to laugh when he saw the expression on Nicholas's face. Excuse me for a minute, Nicholas. Gustavo has got to settle down before he falls down. I'll stay here sitting in this sofa until you two are ready to hear the latest, Nicholas said. Reclining against the back of the seat, he looked pleased with himself. A moment later, when Dan and Gustavo were sitting across the little man, he said, So I hear you've kept your promise and got yourself a job, didn't you? He fixed his gaze on Gustavo. Yes, I sure did, Nicholas. And it feels great, I tell you. I can't believe I waited so long before looking for a job. It's like I'm 20 again. He paused. I think I should thank you for being hired so quickly, don't I? No thanks necessary, Gustavo. You took the first step, and I just pushed things along, that's all. But you know I've never driven a semi before, and I'm a bit worried that I'm going to mess it up first time out. No need for you to worry about anything, Gustavo. It's all taken care of. On Monday you'll step aboard one of those rigs just as if you'd done so 1,000,000 times. You'll see. Well, I'm glad to hear that one of us is confident. Trust in God, Gustavo. He's the one minding this house. So, and as I said, I wouldn't worry about a thing. Okay then, Gustavo concluded, throwing a glance to Dan. I'm sure you're not here only to reassure me about the driving, are you? Quite right, you are, Nicholas replied. In fact, I have some news that may interest the both of you. Oh, and what's that? Dan asked, visibly anxious to hear the latest. Well, it's a bit complicated, I'm afraid, but let me tell you what I've heard. Remember I told you that I couldn't travel in the future. None of us can, actually, but all of us can take an occasional trip into the past. Dan and Gustavo nodded in unison. Well, it seems that your wife, Dan, and your children are presently having tea in Miami Beach. Wow, that's great, Dan exclaimed, all excited. That means they found the time frame. He stopped, seeing the sombre look on Nicholas's face. Or did they? Not exactly, no. They're actually visiting 1950. But why? What on earth are they doing there? It's a bit complicated, as I said, but it seems that the children needed to be reminded of life before electronic gadgets. What are you saying? Dan demanded. Well, you see, in your future, technology would have progressed so rapidly that portable phones and large-screen televisions together with home computers will occupy all of the youngsters' time. And our Lord apparently thought it would be a good idea to give them a taste of the past while there was an opportunity to do so. And they're going to stay there? Or should I go and join them, since it's in the past? Dan said, pleading almost. Nicholas waved a hand in front of his face. No, Dan, there is no plan for you to do that, but there is something that Gustavo will need to do. Me? How? I've nothing to do with Dan's family. Gustavo cut in, switching his gaze from Nicholas to Dan in turn. Well, let's just say your warfare experience would teach Dan's youngest son how to fall out of love with war. Apparently, he will need to be shown how war can destroy the souls of people. And I think you know exactly what I mean in that regard, don't you? Consternation, written all over his face, Gustavo replied. If I can help one kid out of killing people, you've got me, Nicholas. He turned to Dan. That's if you're okay with me teaching your kid a thing or two. Dan nodded. I seem to remember something about a town near Sunperk. I don't know what it's got to do with this, but I know I saw people being killed on a road leading to a village where children were dying from the lack of food. He lifted his saddened eyes to Nicholas. If there's anything I could dissuade that son of mine from enlisting, I'd be the first to do it. Are you sure, Dan? Nicholas asked. Dan nodded again. The reason I ask is because you yourself is about to enroll for that training, leading you to become a jet fighter pilot. So this is the question I need to repeat to you. Are you sure about not wanting your son to take up arms? Yes, I am very sure in a way. To tell you the truth, right now I don't remember my son, but I would never want him to be on the front line during combat. Dan paused. But if his dream was to enlist, I would push him to become an officer only after he graduated from college. And if this question has come up while he was growing up, I suppose I must have fortunate enough that he always listened to me in the end, but I would not make a lifetime decision without asking him first. Being on the front line has got to be one of the most dangerous assignments a young man could be put through. The last thing I would like is for anyone to happen to him, and then having to live the rest of my life thinking that I didn't do enough to talk him out of it.